You know what's dangerous? It's not betrayal. It's not hate. It's not even the people who walked away. The most dangerous thing is giving someone the power to control your peace. Every insult you remember, every rejection you replay, every scar you hide, they all exist because you handed someone the keys to your mind. The world doesn't break strong people. It exposes the ones who never learned how to protect themselves. The day you stop expecting kindness from a cruel world is the day their weapons become useless. Pain loses its power when your mind refuses to obey it. The greatest illusion people live with is believing someone else controls how they feel. They think a harsh word ruined their day, betrayal destroyed their confidence, or rejection stole their happiness. The truth is far more uncomfortable. None of those things had power until your mind accepted them as truth. The moment you allow another person's opinion to become your identity, you've already surrendered the only battlefield that truly matters. Most people spend their lives protecting their money, their reputation, and their possessions, while leaving their mind completely unguarded. They lock their doors at night, but leave the gates of their thoughts wide open for anyone to walk in and rearrange. Watch people carefully. A stranger insults them, and suddenly their entire mood changes. Someone ignores their message, and they invent 100 stories in their head. One failure convinces them they're worthless. One criticism makes them question years of hard work. It's fascinating how easily people hand over the remote control of their emotions to complete strangers. They complain about being manipulated while willingly giving others permission to decide whether they smile or suffer. That's not strength. That's silent. Slavery disguised as sensitivity. The world has always rewarded those who remain calm while everyone else loses control. The loudest person in the room often feels the weakest inside. Real power rarely needs to announce itself. It watches, observes, calculates, and chooses its response instead of reacting without thinking. Every emotional outburst reveals exactly where someone can be controlled. Every visible weakness becomes an invitation for someone else to press the same wound again and again until it defines you. People will test you, some intentionally, others without even realizing it. They'll question your worth, doubt your dreams, laugh at your ambition, and remind you of every mistake you've ever made. Not because they're always evil, but because that's what insecure people do. They throw their confusion into someone else's mind, hoping it will become lighter for themselves. If you absorb every opinion thrown your way, your identity becomes a collection of other people's fears instead of your own beliefs. Control begins the moment you realize your thoughts don't have to obey every emotion. Just because anger knocks on your door doesn't mean it deserves a seat at your table. Just because fear whispers in your ear doesn't mean it deserves your attention. Thoughts appear without permission, but believing them is always a choice. Most people never question the voice inside their head. They assume every negative thought is a fact instead of recognizing it as noise. They become prisoners of stories that never happened and fears that never existed outside their imagination. Imagine carrying a glass of poison everywhere you go because someone convinced you it was medicine. That's exactly what resentment looks like. Every time you replay betrayal, every time you relive humiliation, every time you feed your anger, you're drinking from the same bottle, expecting someone else to suffer. The person who hurt you may have forgotten your name years ago while you're still carrying the weight they left behind. They moved on. You stayed chained to a memory. A controlled mind cannot be intimidated because it no longer depends on approval. Compliments become pleasant instead of necessary. Criticism becomes information instead of destruction. Success becomes satisfying instead of addictive. Failure becomes a lesson instead of an identity. That's what freedom looks like. Not escaping difficult people, but becoming impossible for difficult people to control. Silence becomes one of your strongest weapons. Not the silence of fear, but the silence of understanding. You stop explaining yourself to people determined to misunderstand you. You stop arguing with those who confuse noise for intelligence. You stop chasing validation from crowds that applaud today and disappear tomorrow. Every unnecessary reaction steals energy that could have been invested in building yourself. When your mind becomes disciplined, chaos loses its invitation. Insults become sounds instead of wounds. Rejection becomes direction instead of defeat. Doubt becomes background noise instead of a command. The same world that once seemed full of enemies suddenly looks different because the battlefield was never outside. It was always inside your own mind, waiting for someone strong enough to take control. Expectations are invisible contracts that nobody else agreed to sign. You expect loyalty because you're loyal. You expect honesty because you tell the truth. You expect respect because you give it freely. Then one day, reality tears those expectations apart, and suddenly, you're standing there, wondering why it hurts so much. The pain didn't come from what people did. It came from the story you wrote in your mind about who you believed they should be. Reality never promised to follow your script, yet you punish yourself every time it doesn't. The world doesn't owe you understanding. It doesn't owe you fairness, kindness, appreciation, or closure. Those are beautiful things when they happen, but they become dangerous the moment you believe they're guaranteed. Most people walk through life expecting everyone to think like them, care like them, and sacrifice like them. When those expectations collapse, they call it betrayal. Sometimes it is betrayal. Most of the time, it's simply people revealing who they've always been while you were too distracted by your own hopes to notice. Watch how easily people wear masks. They smile when they need something. They promise forever when it's convenient. They praise you while you're useful and criticize you when your value no longer benefits them. None of this is new. Human nature has always been a theater where everyone plays different roles depending on the audience. The mistake isn't that people wear masks. The mistake is believing every performance is the truth. Expectation is the architect of disappointment. The higher you build it, the harder it falls. You expect someone to stay forever, and you're devastated when they leave. You expect gratitude after helping someone, and you're shocked when they forget your sacrifice. You expect people to remember your kindness, while they conveniently remember only your mistakes. You keep investing your peace into outcomes you were never in control of, then wonder why life feels so exhausting. Freedom begins when you stop expecting people to become versions of themselves that exist only inside your imagination. Accept them exactly as their actions reveal them, not as their words describe them. Words are cheap. Promises cost nothing. Patterns tell the truth. A person can lie with their mouth 1,000 times, but their behavior eventually confesses everything. The problem is that hope often makes people blind. They ignore patterns because they're addicted to potential. People will disappoint you, not because they're monsters, but because they're human. Fear changes people. Greed changes people. Jealousy changes people. Comfort changes people. Some will choose themselves over you without hesitation, even after years of friendship. Others will disappear the moment life becomes inconvenient. The sooner you understand this, the less power disappointment has over your emotions. Detachment isn't about becoming cold. It's about becoming clear. You can care deeply without expecting permanence. You can love someone without believing they belong to you. You can help others without demanding recognition. You can give your best without expecting everyone to appreciate it. The moment your actions stop depending on how others respond, your peace becomes untouchable. People often mistake detachment for weakness because they don't understand it. They think if you're no longer chasing, begging, explaining, or proving yourself, you've stopped caring. The truth is the opposite. You've simply stopped wasting energy trying to control things that were never yours to control. Nothing confuses manipulative people more than someone who no longer reacts to guilt, emotional games, or empty promises. They lose their influence the moment your expectations disappear. Notice how dangerous emotional dependence becomes. One message can make you happy. One ignored call can ruin your entire day. One compliment gives you confidence. One insult destroys it. Your emotional balance swings like a puppet because someone else is holding the strings. That's not love. That's addiction, disguised as attachment. The strongest people aren't the ones who never feel disappointment. They're the ones who refuse to build their happiness on the unpredictable behavior of others. The day you stop expecting the world to protect your heart is the day you begin protecting it yourself. You observe more than you assume. You listen more than you believe. You trust slowly, forgive wisely, and never confuse someone's temporary kindness with permanent character. You stop chasing explanations from people who enjoy leaving questions unanswered. You stop demanding loyalty from those who have already shown where their priorities truly belong. Your peace no longer waits for anyone's approval because it was never supposed to depend on someone else's choices. Pain has a strange way of introducing itself. It never knocks politely. It breaks the door down, rearranges everything you believed about life, and leaves without explaining why. Most people spend years trying to erase those moments, pretending they never happened. They hide their scars, bury their memories, and convince themselves that forgetting is healing. But pain doesn't disappear because you ignore it. It waits quietly in the darkest corners of your mind until the next disappointment wakes it up again. The difference between ordinary people and the ones who become unbreakable isn't the amount of suffering they experience. It's what they decide to do with it. One person lets pain become an excuse. Another lets it become fuel. One spends years asking, "Why did this happen to me?" while the other asks, "What can this teach me?" The event may be identical, but the outcome becomes completely different because the mind chooses its own meaning. Every betrayal leaves behind two gifts. The first is the wound everyone notices. The second is the lesson most people ignore. They become so obsessed with revenge that they forget wisdom was standing right beside it. The person who lied to you didn't just reveal their character. They also exposed where your boundaries were too weak. The person who abandoned you didn't only leave a memory behind. They showed you what happens when your happiness depends entirely on someone else's presence. Life has no interest in making anyone comfortable. It tests every weakness until it either disappears or destroys you. The same pain keeps returning in different faces until you finally understand what it came to teach. Different names, different places, different situations, but the same lesson wearing another disguise. Ignore it once, and it comes back louder. Ignore it again, and it becomes a pattern that follows you everywhere. People often ask why bad things keep happening to them. They rarely ask why they keep responding the same way. The world changes constantly, but an undisciplined mind repeats old habits without realizing it. Hurt people trust too quickly because they're desperate to feel safe again. Betrayed people sometimes become blind to new warning signs because hope is louder than experience. They carry yesterday's wounds into tomorrow's decisions and wonder why history keeps repeating itself. Strength isn't pretending pain never existed. Strength is refusing to let pain decide who you become. Anyone can smile while life is easy. Anyone can feel confident when everything is working. Real character appears when everything falls apart and there's no audience watching. That's when you discover whether your identity was built on comfort or conviction. There comes a moment when you stop asking for justice from a world that was never designed to be fair. You realize revenge doesn't repair broken pieces. Hatred doesn't return lost years. Bitterness doesn't erase memories. Holding on to suffering only guarantees that the people who hurt you continue living inside your head long after they've left your life. They become permanent guests because you keep serving them your attention every single day. Pain is expensive. It charges interest every time you replay it. Every sleepless night, every angry conversation inside your mind, every imaginary argument where you finally say what you wish you had said. While you're trapped inside yesterday, life quietly moves forward without waiting. Opportunities pass, peace disappears, time slips away. The wound remains fresh because you keep reopening it with your own thoughts. There is something unsettling about someone who has survived their darkest moments without losing control of themselves. They no longer panic when life becomes uncertain. They no longer fear rejection because they've already survived loneliness. They no longer crumble under criticisms because they've learned that opinions cannot define reality. The storms that once terrified them eventually became proof that they could endure more than they ever imagined. Every scar carries evidence that you were damaged but not destroyed. Every disappointment teaches you where illusions once existed. Every failure strips away another layer of arrogance until only resilience remains. People who have never suffered often mistake comfort for strength because they've never been forced to discover the difference. The strongest minds are rarely created through easy victories. They're shaped in silence, built through disappointment, and sharpened by moments nobody else ever sees. The goal is never to avoid pain. That's impossible. The goal is to become someone pain can no longer control. Instead of asking why life became difficult, you begin asking how this struggle can make your judgment sharper, your patience deeper, your discipline stronger, and your mind impossible to manipulate. The same fire that melts weak metal forges stronger steel, depending entirely on what it's burning. Emotions are incredible servants, but terrible masters. The moment they take control, logic quietly leaves the room. Anger convinces you to destroy what took years to build. Fear tells you to run from opportunities that could change your life. Jealousy whispers that someone else's success somehow steals your own. Pride refuses to apologize, even when silence is costing you everything. Most people believe they're making decisions with reason, but they're simply obeying whatever emotion happens to be screaming the loudest. The easiest person to manipulate is the one who reacts instantly. They hear one insult and explode. They face one disappointment and quit. They receive one criticism and begin doubting their entire identity. They don't pause. They don't observe. They don't question. They simply react, and every reaction reveals exactly where their weaknesses are hiding. People don't need to know your secrets. if they can predict your emotions. Once they know what makes you angry, afraid, desperate, or insecure, they know exactly how to control your next move. The world is filled with people who understand this better than you think. Some provoke you because they enjoy watching you lose control. Others do it because an emotional person is easier to influence than a calm one. A distracted mind makes expensive mistakes. A furious mind ignores consequences. A frightened mind accepts things it would normally reject. Emotional chaos has always been one of the oldest weapons in existence because it requires no force. It only requires your permission. Watch what happens when someone insults you. Before the words even settle, your heartbeat changes, your muscles tighten, your thoughts race. Suddenly, you're preparing a response before you've even asked yourself whether the opinion deserves your attention. That's how quickly the mind can become a prisoner. A few sounds leave another person's mouth, and your entire body begins obeying them as if they hold authority over your peace. It's almost amusing how willingly people surrender control without realizing it. Pastoring your emotions doesn't mean becoming cold or lifeless. It means refusing to let temporary feelings make permanent decisions. Anger may visit, but it doesn't get to drive. Fear may appear, but it doesn't choose your direction. Sadness may exist, but it doesn't become your identity. Every emotion has something to say, but not every emotion deserves to be believed. The strongest minds learn to listen without becoming obedient. Most regrets begin with the same sentence: I wasn't thinking. The truth is, you were thinking, but your emotions were thinking louder. Every relationship destroyed in a moment of rage. Every opportunity abandoned because of fear. Every friendship ruined by pride. Every dream delayed by self-doubt. None of these happen because people lack intelligence. They happen because intelligence disappears whenever emotions take command without discipline. Silence is one of the most misunderstood forms of strength. People assume the loudest voice wins, but history often belongs to the person who remained calm while everyone else became emotional. Remaining composed when someone is trying to provoke you is more intimidating than shouting back. Nothing frustrates manipulative people more than realizing their words no longer create the reaction they expected. They throw bait into the water, but nothing bites. Eventually, they become exhausted because their power existed only through your response. Notice how peaceful your life becomes when you stop reacting to everything. Every opinion doesn't require a defense. Every insult doesn't deserve revenge. Every misunderstanding doesn't need an explanation. People will create stories about you, no matter what you do. Some will dislike you for reasons that exist only inside their own minds. Chasing every accusation is like trying to stop the wind with your hands. The more energy you waste, the less peace you keep. Discipline begins in moments nobody celebrates. It begins when you choose not to send the angry message, when you decide not to answer disrespect with disrespect, When you refuse to let one bad day become permission to destroy weeks of progress. Those small victories rarely receive applause, yet they quietly transform your character. Self-control is built one decision at a time until it becomes stronger than your impulses. A calm mind sees opportunities hidden inside chaos. While everyone else panics, it notices solutions. While others become blinded by emotion, it studies patterns. It understands that every storm eventually passes. But the damage caused by uncontrolled reactions often lasts much longer than the storm itself. The person who controls their emotions cannot always control the world around them, but they become impossible for the world to control from within. Their peace no longer depends on the behavior, opinions, or intentions of anyone standing in front of them, because the greatest victory was never over other people. It was always over themselves. There comes a moment when something inside you changes forever, not because life suddenly becomes easier, but because you finally stop expecting it to be. You realize the world has been testing you all along, watching how easily your emotions can be bought, your attention can be stolen, and your peace can be shattered. Once you understand the game, you stop playing by rules designed to keep you weak. You stop measuring your worth through the opinions of people who haven't even figured out their own lives. Most people believe becoming untouchable means nobody can hurt them anymore. That's impossible. Pain will always exist. Loss will always arrive without warning. People will still lie, betray, disappoint, and walk away. Becoming untouchable doesn't erase those realities. It changes what happens after they appear. Instead of collapsing, you observe. Instead of chasing answers, you accept patterns. Instead of begging people to stay, you open the door wider. The strongest walls are never built around your life. They're built around your peace of mind. Watch how the world reacts when it realizes you can no longer be manipulated. The people who controlled you with guilt suddenly become frustrated. The ones who relied on your fear lose their influence. Those who expected endless explanations become uncomfortable with your silence. They mistake your calmness for arrogance because they cannot understand someone who refuses to participate in emotional games. They keep pressing the same buttons, forgetting those buttons no longer exist. Being mentally untouchable means your identity no longer changes every time someone changes their opinion about you. Praise doesn't make you feel invincible. Criticism doesn't make you feel worthless. Success doesn't convince you that you're superior. Failure doesn't convince you that you're finished. Your value stops depending on circumstances because you've built it on discipline instead of emotions. That's a foundation. Storms struggle to shake. People often waste years trying to prove themselves to those who already decided not to understand them. They chase acceptance from crowds that forget their names overnight. They sacrifice their peace, trying to satisfy expectations that keep changing. It's a game with no finish line, because the approval of others is never permanent. The same people applauding you today may be criticizing you tomorrow. If your confidence rises and falls with every opinion, your life becomes an endless roller coaster controlled by strangers. There is freedom in no longer needing everyone to agree with you. There is power in walking away without demanding the last word. There is strength in allowing people to misunderstand you while refusing to betray yourself just to make them comfortable. Not every battle deserves your attention. Some victories come from refusing to fight at all. Every unnecessary argument steals energy from goals that actually deserve your focus. The mind becomes dangerous when it learns the difference between reacting and responding. Reaction belongs to impulse. Response belongs to wisdom. One is immediate. The other is intentional. Most people never create space between what happens and how they answer it. That tiny space is where freedom lives. That's where self-control defeats chaos. That's where manipulation loses its grip. Look closely at people who seem impossible to intimidate. They aren't fearless. They've simply made peace with uncertainty. They know rejection won't destroy them because they've survived loneliness before. They know failure isn't fatal because they've rebuilt themselves more than once. They know betrayal reveals character, not destiny. Their confidence isn't based on the promise that life will be kind. It's built on the certainty that they can survive even when it isn't. Your greatest protection isn't money, status, intelligence, or influence. Those things can disappear overnight. The one thing nobody can steal without your permission is the way you choose to think. A disciplined mind remains valuable in every circumstance. It adapts instead of panicking. It learns instead of complaining. It observes instead of assuming. It understands that every difficult experience carries information, while every emotional reaction risks throwing that information away. The world will continue trying to distract you with insults, temptations, comparisons, and endless noise. Weak minds chase every distraction because they fear being ignored. Strong minds remain focused because they understand attention is one of the most valuable currencies they possess. Every minute spent arguing with negativity is a minute stolen from building something meaningful. Every ounce of energy wasted seeking revenge is energy unavailable for creating a future that no longer resembles the past. The day your peace becomes more important than your pride, your discipline becomes stronger than your impulses, and your purpose becomes louder than the opinions surrounding you. People will still try to shake you. Life will still create storms, and obstacles will still appear, but they will discover that the version of you they once controlled no longer exists, because the greatest shield was never built around your body, your reputation, or your circumstances. It was built inside a mind that finally refused to surrender itself to anyone.